In 1953, a Betty Crocker test kitchen recipe card listed an ingredient combination so strange that modern publishers have refused to reprint it for 70 years. Buried inside community cookbooks and church fundraiser pamphlets, these sandwiches fed millions of American families during a decade of post-war prosperity. Yet today, not one of them survives on a restaurant menu anywhere in the country. Some were born from rationing habits that refused to die. Others were status symbols, served on good china to impress the neighbors. A few were simply the product of a generation that believed anything could go between two slices of bread if you added enough mayonnaise. 20 of these recipes have been pulled directly from the pages of vintage cookbooks, and the first one begins with an ingredient most people today would never think to toast. 1. Potted meat and watercress sandwich. In the 1950s, potted meat sandwiches appeared most often at afternoon teas and ladies' luncheons, particularly across the American South and in homes that traced their culinary habits back to British tradition. Potted meat, a finely ground paste of seasoned beef or ham preserved in its own fat, came packaged in small tins and required no cooking at all. Watercress, often grown in home gardens near creeks and springs, added a peppery brightness that cut through the richness of the meat. The sandwich itself was simple. Potted meat spread thick on soft white bread, topped with a generous layer of watercress leaves, and trimmed of crusts for a tidy presentation. The texture combined a dense, almost pâté-like filling with the crisp snap of fresh greens. Brands such as Underwood deviled ham were pantry staples in many households, and church cookbooks throughout the rural South still list watercress sandwiches as a required item for spring gatherings, a tradition some families continue without realizing its origin. 2. Mock crab sandwich, egg and cheese. Mock crab sandwiches gained popularity during the 1950s in households watching their grocery budgets, while still wanting to serve something that felt special for Sunday supper or a ladies' bridge club gathering. Real crab meat was expensive and often unavailable far from coastal regions. So home cooks created a clever substitute using hard-boiled eggs and sharp cheddar cheese. The eggs were mashed and combined with grated cheese, a touch of mayonnaise, and a dash of Worcestershire sauce to mimic the briny depth of seafood. Some recipes called for a small amount of canned tuna folded in to strengthen the illusion further. The result was a pale, slightly lumpy filling with a tangy, savory bite, spread between slices of white bread and sometimes garnished with a sprinkle of paprika for color. Midwestern church cookbooks frequently listed this recipe under the heading crab sandwich, no crab, a phrase that reflected both honesty and quiet pride in resourceful cooking. 3. Cucumber and cream cheese tea sandwich. Cucumber and cream cheese tea sandwiches held a fixed place at formal gatherings throughout the 1950s, particularly at bridal showers, garden parties, and afternoon teas hosted by women's clubs across suburban America. The dish carried an air of refinement, borrowed loosely from English tea traditions, but adapted with American ingredients readily found in any grocery store. Thinly sliced cucumbers, peeled and lightly salted to draw out excess moisture, were layered over a smooth spread of softened cream cheese, often blended with a touch of dill or onion powder for added depth. The bread was trimmed of its crusts and cut into delicate triangles or rounds, designed to be eaten in 2 or 3 bites without disturbing white gloves or good table linens. The texture balanced cool, crisp cucumber against the dense creaminess of the cheese. Many hostesses considered Philadelphia brand cream cheese essential, and recipe cards from this era often specified it by name, treating substitutions as a minor social failing. 4. Spam and pineapple sandwich. The spam and pineapple sandwich became a fixture of post-war American kitchens during the 1950s, when canned meat remained a practical and affordable staple left over from wartime rationing habits. Families across the country, particularly in Hawaii and along the West Coast, embraced spam as a versatile centerpiece for quick lunches and casual dinners alike. The sandwich itself involved frying thick slices of spam in a hot skillet until the edges turned golden and slightly caramelized, then placing them atop a slice of canned pineapple, which was often grilled alongside the meat to soften its texture and intensify its sweetness. The combination produced a striking contrast: salty, fatty meat against the bright acidity and sugar of the fruit, all held together by soft white bread, sometimes brushed with butter and toasted. Hormel's advertising campaigns of the decade actively promoted such pairings, encouraging housewives to view canned meat not as a wartime necessity but as a gateway to culinary creativity and tropical flair. 5. Deviled ham and pickle relish sandwich. Deviled ham and pickle relish sandwiches found their place in the lunch pails of factory workers and the brown bags of schoolchildren throughout the 1950s. Prized for their convenience and long shelf life, the deviled ham came straight from a can, a smooth paste of ground ham seasoned with mustard, vinegar, and a touch of cayenne, requiring nothing more than a spoon and a steady hand to spread it evenly. Sweet pickle relish, scooped from a jar kept in nearly every refrigerator door, added a sharp, tangy crunch that balanced the richness of the meat. Mixed together, the filling took on a coral pink hue and a texture somewhere between paste and salad, spread generously between 2 slices of soft white bread. The sandwich required no refrigeration once assembled, making it ideal for wrapping in waxed paper and tucking into a lunch pail before sunrise. Underwood's iconic devil-shaped logo on the can became so familiar that many households simply called the dish devil sandwiches, a name that stuck for generations. 6. Cheese and date sandwich. The cheese and date sandwich appeared most often on dessert trays and at afternoon coffee gatherings throughout the 1950s, occupying a curious space between a savory snack and a sweet treat. Home economics teachers frequently included it in lesson plans, presenting it to students as proof that everyday pantry staples could be combined in unexpected and sophisticated ways. The preparation called for softened cream cheese, sometimes blended with a small amount of orange juice or zest to loosen its texture, spread thickly onto slices of brown or white bread. Chopped dates, sticky and intensely sweet, were pressed into the cheese, their dense chewiness contrasting sharply with the smooth, cool spread beneath. Some versions added chopped walnuts for crunch, transforming the sandwich into something closer to a confection than a meal. Many recipe cards from this period suggested cutting these sandwiches into thin strips and serving them alongside hot tea or coffee, positioning them as a refined alternative to store-bought cookies for unexpected guests. 7. Roquefort and walnut sandwich. Roquefort and walnut sandwiches signaled a certain worldliness in 1950s America, appearing on the menus of upscale department store luncheonettes and in the recipe collections of hostesses eager to demonstrate cosmopolitan taste. Roquefort cheese, imported from France and considered a luxury item, carried a reputation that elevated even the simplest dish into something resembling fine dining. The preparation involved crumbling the cheese into softened butter until the mixture turned pale blue-green and intensely fragrant, with a sharp, salty bite that lingered on the tongue. Chopped walnuts, toasted lightly to bring out their oils, were folded into this mixture, adding both texture and a faint bitterness that complemented the cheese's tang. The spread was layered onto thin slices of dark rye or pumpernickel bread, chosen specifically because their dense, earthy flavor could stand up to the boldness of the filling. Gourmet magazines of the era often paired this sandwich with a small glass of sherry, framing it as an appetizer rather than a casual lunch. Tomato aspic sandwiches occupied a peculiar but respected position at 1950s luncheons, particularly among hostesses who valued presentation as much as flavor. Aspic, a savory gelatin made from tomato juice, lemon, and seasonings, was poured into molds and chilled until firm, then sliced thin enough to fit between 2 pieces of bread. The texture proved unlike anything common today, wobbling slightly yet holding its shape, with a cool, tangy intensity that tasted of concentrated tomato soup. Some recipes suggested layering the aspic with cream cheese to soften its sharpness and add a creamy contrast. The sandwich was typically served on dainty white bread, crusts removed, and arranged carefully on platters lined with lettuce leaves. Women's magazines of the decade praised aspic for its make-ahead convenience, since it could be prepared a day in advance and sliced just before serving, a quality that made it especially popular for luncheons where the hostess needed to appear effortlessly composed. Liver and bacon sandwiches belonged firmly to the world of working-class diners and farm kitchens throughout the 1950s, where organ meats remained both affordable and nutritionally valued by households raised on wartime frugality. Calf's liver, sliced thin and dredged lightly in flour, was fried in bacon fat until just cooked through, retaining a soft, almost custard-like center beneath a slightly crisped exterior. Strips of bacon, fried separately until crisp, were laid directly on top of the liver while both were still warm, allowing the fat to mingle and soften the bread beneath. The sandwich carried a deep, mineral richness from the liver, balanced by the smoky saltiness of the bacon. Often served open-faced on a single slice of toasted bread and eaten with a knife and fork rather than held by hand. Many diners along rural highways listed this dish as a daily special, considering it a hearty, no-nonsense meal suited to laborers and travelers alike. Shrimp wiggle sandwiches descended from a creamed shrimp dish popular decades earlier, repurposed during the 1950s as a quick lunch option for households looking to stretch a small can of shrimp into something filling. The name itself referred to the wobbly, jiggling texture of the cream sauce once it cooled slightly, a quality home cooks found amusing rather than off-putting. Canned shrimp, drained and chopped, were folded into a thick white sauce made from butter, flour, and milk, often seasoned with a touch of paprika or Worcestershire sauce for depth. This mixture was spooned generously onto toasted bread, where the warmth of the toast caused the sauce to soften further, creating a dish best eaten with a fork despite its sandwich classification. The flavor leaned mild and creamy, with the shrimp providing brininess rather than dominating the dish. Recipe cards from this period often appeared under luncheon dishes, reflecting their role as a midday meal rather than a portable food. Egg and anchovy paste sandwiches appeared in 1950s cookbooks, aimed at hostesses seeking to impress guests with bold, unexpected flavor combinations, particularly at cocktail parties where small, intensely flavored bites were preferred over large meals. Anchovy paste, sold in small tubes and prized for its concentrated, salty punch, was blended with mashed hard-boiled eggs and a touch of butter to create a smooth, savory spread. The result carried an intensity that modern palates might find surprising, with the fishy sharpness of the anchovy cutting through the mild richness of the egg. This mixture was spread thinly onto small squares of toasted white bread, sometimes garnished with a single caper or a sprig of parsley for visual appeal. Hostess guides of the decade often recommended serving these alongside martinis, positioning the sandwich as a sophisticated appetizer rather than everyday fare. A small but assertive flavor meant to awaken the appetite before a larger meal. Cold meatloaf sandwiches represented one of the most practical dishes to emerge from 1950s home kitchens, born directly from the common practice of stretching Sunday's dinner into Monday's lunch. Meatloaf, made from ground beef, breadcrumbs, egg, and seasoned tomato sauce, was baked in a loaf pan and allowed to cool completely overnight in the refrigerator, where it firmed into slices dense enough to hold together without crumbling. The next day, these slices were placed cold between two pieces of bread, often spread with mustard or ketchup to add moisture and brightness to what had become a slightly drier, more compact texture than the night before. Some families preferred their meatloaf sandwiches with a slice of raw onion or a leaf of iceberg lettuce for crunch. Far from being considered leftovers in a negative sense, cold meatloaf sandwiches were viewed as an expected and welcome part of the weekly meal rotation, a small reward for the effort of Sunday's larger dinner. Cheese and marmalade sandwiches reflected a British culinary influence that persisted in certain American households throughout the 1950s, particularly among families with recent immigrant ties or those who took afternoon tea seriously as a daily ritual. The combination paired sharp cheddar cheese, sliced thin, with a generous spread of orange marmalade, its bitter rind and sweet citrus flavor creating a contrast that surprised those unfamiliar with the pairing. The cheese provided a firm, slightly crumbly texture, while the marmalade added a sticky brightness that balanced the saltiness of the cheddar. Typically served on slices of white or whole wheat bread, sometimes lightly toasted to allow the cheese to soften just slightly, the sandwich occupied an unusual middle ground between breakfast and dessert. Regional cookbooks from areas with strong English heritage, particularly in parts of New England, included this combination as a suggestion for using up the last of a marmalade jar before opening a new one. Sardine and cream cheese rolls appeared frequently on appetizer trays during the 1950s, particularly at cocktail parties and bridge club gatherings where finger foods needed to be both flavorful and easy to eat without utensils. Canned sardines, packed in oil, were mashed thoroughly and blended with softened cream cheese until the mixture reached a spreadable consistency, with the fish's natural oils helping bind everything together. This mixture was spread evenly across a slice of soft white bread with the crust removed, then rolled tightly into a log shape and chilled until firm enough to slice into bite-sized pinwheels. The flavor combined the briny, slightly metallic taste of sardines with the cool richness of cream cheese, creating something far more delicate than the strong fish flavor might suggest on its own. Hostesses often arranged these pinwheels on a platter with toothpicks, presenting them as an elegant alternative to simple crackers and cheese for guests arriving before dinner. You said, peanut butter and pickle sandwich. Peanut butter and pickle sandwiches found their way into 1950s lunchboxes across rural America, often appearing in farm households where pantry staples needed to stretch across large families with growing children. Peanut butter, by this decade widely available and inexpensive, was spread thick onto one slice of bread, while the second slice received a layer of thinly sliced dill pickles, their juice slightly soaking into the bread beneath. The combination produced a startling contrast, the dense, oily sweetness of the peanut butter meeting the sharp, vinegary crunch of the pickle, creating a flavor some children grew to crave and others refused outright. Mothers often packed the sandwich specifically because the ingredients required no refrigeration and would not spoil in a metal lunch pail left near a wood stove or in a hot schoolhouse. Some farm community cookbooks listed the pairing matter-of-factly, without explanation, suggesting it required none for those who grew up eating it. Beef tongue and horseradish sandwiches belonged to a generation of cooks who considered organ and lesser cuts of meat not as scraps but as ingredients worthy of careful preparation, particularly in German and Eastern European immigrant communities throughout the urban Midwest during the 1950s. The tongue itself required hours of slow simmering with onion, bay leaf, and peppercorns until tender enough to peel and slice paper-thin, revealing a texture both delicate and slightly gelatinous. Prepared horseradish, freshly grated and mixed with a touch of sour cream or mayonnaise, was spread onto rye bread, its sharp heat cutting directly through the richness of the meat. The sandwich carried a deep, almost beef stew flavor from the tongue, intensified by the horseradish's bite, often served at delicatessens alongside a pickle spear and a cup of strong coffee. Families who prepared tongue at home considered it a Sunday dish, the long cooking time fitting naturally into a day already devoted to slower cooking. Hard-boiled egg and sardine sandwiches served as a reliable protein-rich lunch for working men throughout the 1950s, particularly in coastal towns where canned sardines remained cheap and plentiful. The preparation involved mashing hard-boiled eggs with a fork until coarsely crumbled, then mixing in drained sardines that had been broken apart with the back of a spoon, their small bones softened enough during canning to disappear into the filling entirely. A small amount of mayonnaise or mustard bound the mixture together, while a pinch of black pepper added the only seasoning many recipes called for. The texture combined the soft, slightly grainy quality of mashed egg with the firmer, oilier flakes of fish, creating a filling that was hearty without being heavy. Spread onto thick slices of bread, this sandwich appeared often in the lunch pails of dockworkers and fishermen, a practical meal built from whatever the morning's catch had not sold. Cheese and pineapple loaf sandwiches relied on a specific processed food product common to 1950s grocery stores, a pressed loaf combining cheddar cheese with bits of candied pineapple, sold pre-sliced in delicatessen cases across the country. This loaf carried a sweet, slightly tangy flavor running through firm, pale orange cheese, with small chewy pieces of pineapple distributed evenly throughout each slice. Simply placed between two slices of white bread, often with a thin spread of mayonnaise, the sandwich required no further preparation, making it a favorite for quick lunches assembled in seconds. The combination of sweet fruit and sharp cheese divided opinion even at the time, with some considering it a clever novelty and others finding it strange. Grocery store delis throughout the Midwest stocked this loaf specifically for sandwich purposes, and its disappearance from shelves by the 1970s left an entire category of sandwich without its key ingredient. Chicken and walnut salad sandwiches represented a step up from ordinary lunch fare during the 1950s, often reserved for special occasions such as bridal luncheons, holiday gatherings, or meals served to important guests. Leftover roast chicken, diced into small, even pieces, was combined with mayonnaise, a touch of lemon juice, and chopped celery for crunch, while toasted walnuts added both texture and a rich, slightly bitter depth that elevated the dish beyond a simple chicken salad. The mixture held together firmly enough to spread evenly without falling apart, with the walnuts providing an audible crunch against the otherwise soft filling. Served on white bread or croissants when available, the sandwich often appeared at luncheons hosted by women's clubs, where presentation mattered as much as flavor. Many hostesses considered the addition of walnuts the detail that separated an ordinary chicken sandwich from one worth serving to company. Prune and cream cheese sandwiches occupied a curious place in 1950s home cooking, recommended frequently in health-focused cookbooks and women's magazines as a wholesome option for breakfast or a light afternoon snack. Stewed prunes, softened until nearly jam-like, were chopped finely and blended with softened cream cheese, creating a filling that balanced the prune's natural sweetness and slight tartness against the cheese's mild richness. The texture proved smooth with occasional small pieces of prune skin, spread generously onto slices of brown bread or whole wheat toast. Mothers often served this sandwich to children specifically for its perceived digestive benefits, a quality prunes had long been associated with in household remedies. Recipe cards from this era frequently appeared in sections labeled for the children's lunchbox or nutritious snacks, framing the sandwich less as an indulgence and more as a small act of parental responsibility disguised as food. You said, "Give me a short outro with a strong CTA for this video." History has a way of disappearing one recipe card at a time, and the 20 sandwiches in this video represent just a fraction of what families once relied upon every single day. If one of these recipes surprised you, brought back a memory, or made you grateful for modern grocery stores, leave a comment and let us know which one you would never try, and which one you might actually attempt this week. Subscribe now because forgotten food history like this disappears from the internet just as quickly as it disappeared from kitchens, and new episodes uncover recipes even stranger than these. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next deep dive into the meals that built modern America, one strange sandwich at a time.